physical education. William and I, LaQuiche, will be your presenters today.
Our goal today will be to share some general information about the disorder Osteogenesis Imperfecta, commonly known as OI, and our experience in working with a student that has been diagnosed with Osteogenesis Imperfecta, and to also share some of the accommodations we made to get her involved in the physical education activities at her school. A little bit about Miss LaQuiche Butler. She has a bachelor's in sports management from Winston-Salem State University and a master's in physical education from Florida A&M University. She is certified in physical education and has been teaching in the field for 10 years. She is also a middle school cheerleader coach and athletic director. Her strong points are classroom management and lesson designs.
A little about William. He has a bachelor's degree in physical education from Towson University and a master's in special education from George Washington University. He is certified in physical education as well as adapted physical education. He has been working in the field for over 20 years, 17 of those years in adaptive. Will has also taught swimming for students with special needs and non-disabled students for the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. These differences in experiences helped him to improve on his teaching. Teaching swimming gave him an appreciation of teaching at the student's level and learning how to help students grow on fundamentals which allow them to learn and improve with their physical and social aspects in physical education.
Inclusion is a popular topic when discussing students with disabilities. All students have the right to participate in a free and appropriate public education. In general, it is the law. We as PE teachers cannot deny a child the access to the physical education class due to their situation or disability. We have to look at inclusion when it comes to dealing with a student who has a disability in the terms of how we can allow the student to be engaged in the activity while participating with their class and at the same time not taken away from the class activity. Our focus is to limit isolation and encourage participation and cooperation. When inclusion works, it promotes physical activity. It also improves psychological factors, and it also reduces the risk of morbidity and mortality. You want the student to eventually learn that they can participate in some activities that they normally would stay away from and learn the importance of developing a healthy lifestyle past the confines of our physical education class.
Understanding the difference between an individualized education plan, or what is commonly referred to as the IEP, versus a 504 plan is very important. By definition, an IEP is a plan or program developed to ensure that a child who has a learning disability identified under the law and is attending an elementary or secondary educational institution receives specialized instruction and related services. The 504 plan is defined as a plan developed to ensure that a child who has a physical disability identified under the law and is attending an elementary school educational institution receives accommodations that will ensure their academic success and access to the learning environment. They are both legally binding documents that are created to ensure that students are given specialized instruction or accommodations to help them be fully engaged and successful in the classroom. Students with the 504 plans do not necessarily require specialized instruction, but like the IEP, a 504 plan should be updated annually to ensure that the student is receiving the most effective accommodations for his or her specific circumstances. The 504 document is created to specifically outline their accessibility requirements. We cannot stress enough in this presentation the importance of documentation. Again, the 504 plan is a legally binding document. Documentation must be kept to ensure that the students are given specialized instructions or accommodations to help them be fully engaged. This could be something as simple as making sure to note the accommodations for the activities in your lesson plan. This is a document that you could take to your meeting to provide as evidence. It is imperative for you to attend meetings. Be a part of those meetings so you can be involved in the decisions that are being made for your class. Remember, these are the things that you are going to be held responsible for executing. Knowing in advance about your student's disability is critical for you to be able to plan and design lessons with accommodations. Make sure that you are keeping notes on the student's progress. What is working? What isn't working? This is for your benefit, just in case the parent or the student raises a complaint or concern. Communication is so very important. Discussions ahead of time with the parent and student are critical. Every 504 is unique, so accommodations must be individualized. Even students with the same disability may be able to function and perform at a variety of skills, may be able to perform a variety of skills at different levels, and that needs to be documented.
When you attend these meetings, you'll have the opportunity to discuss with the parent, student, and other support professionals like the physical or occupational therapist that can inform you of the student's physical limitations, which is all documented as well. This information is key for you to discuss with the parent, student, and other support professionals like physical or occupational therapists that can inform you of the student's physical limitations, which should be all well documented. This information is a key for you to be able to design lessons that will help the student to be fully engaged in the activities. Planning is so important. Keep an open channel of communication with the adaptive PE teacher. They are an invaluable resource to the general PE teacher. If you are in a school system that really doesn't have an adaptive PE teacher, then what you have to try to do is try to think of modifications and things that can work for the child that you're working with. The communication that you have with the parents and other professionals at this meeting will allow you to give you an idea of things that you can work with. Plan for success. You will always encounter obstacles when you are working with students who don't have disabilities and do have disabilities. But when you plan, you increase your success by having available options to do some things if they don't work the way you want. In our approach with planning, we decided to have a lot of station work with our students. We figured out that if the size of the group was smaller, we can allow for more skill development, and psychologically for the student with a disability, the size of the groups gives the student an opportunity to be comfortable and learn. If you have an adaptive PE teacher that you can work with, use that time to collaborate ideas. Explain your concerns and fears, and also explain your expectations. Brainstorm on the safety concerns for all students and develop a consistent routine that you think can work. For us in the inclusion setting, we focus on a consistent warm-up that has a daily routine and structure. This allows us to see growth with all of our students and work on those core fundamentals that all the students can learn while participating. Your warm-ups should be structured as well as independent so the student can follow. For example, with our student, this student would have time to pace and jog around the track for endurance. We started the year moving around the track for 1 lap, and each week we moved up accordingly. We eventually got to the point where we would pace for a desired time. Our student would use this time to challenge their own abilities to see how many times they could get around the track in a desired time. The student showed motivation and eventually looked forward to doing more laps in that desired time.
As you know, the disorder that this particular student has is Osteogenesis Imperfecta. It is more commonly referred to as OI, or brittle bone disease. It is generally characterized as a person with bones that break easily. It is a rare genetic disorder that has only about 40,000 cases reported in the United States. Someone with this disorder may experience hundreds of breaks and fractures over a lifetime. There is currently no known cure for this disease. Medical professionals can only aim to treat the symptoms. Physical therapy is often recommended. Most of the treatments are directed towards controlling the symptoms, maximizing independent mobility, and developing bone mass and muscular strength. The use of mobility aids such as wheelchairs, walkers, braces, etc. are commonly used by those diagnosed with more severe types of OI. Our student, for example, used both the wheelchair and the walker, so we had to be prepared with accommodations for both. And more specifically, our Osteogenesis Imperfecta is divided into 8 levels of severity, level 1 being the least severe, and going all the way up to a level 8, which is highly severe. Our particular student was diagnosed at a level 4. Having a student with this severe of a disability, there were several things that we needed to take into consideration as we were planning and designing activities. We had to take into consideration the safety of all of our students, making sure that we are adapting our lessons that are still fulfilling the needs of all of our students, and making sure that this student feels comfortable enough to self-advocate.
Other things that we had to take into consideration was groupings, spatial awareness, and logistics for the lesson activities. How are we going to modify large games into small group game activities? Teaching and encouraging acceptance of individuals with disabilities, and also having open communication with the student and the class. We believe that there are 8 keys to successful implementation of accommodating students with disabilities in general physical education. Communication being the first major component. Parent communication at times is the aspect of teaching that can get lost or misunderstood. We have all been in this boat. We don't want to deal with this parent because this parent is very aggressive. We don't want to deal with this parent because the parent doesn't respect what we do. At times, what we have to do is we have to humble ourselves so that we can understand what the fears and concerns of the parent are. With our student, she had a unique set of circumstances. The parent requested a meeting with the school staff prior to her child having PE. In the general meeting, it was explained to us that she didn't want her child to be socially isolated during this time, and that her child deserves to be considered just like all of the other students in the class. Parent had some bad baggage and concerns because of the treatment of her child at the previous school. Right there, our staff was on notice because at the previous school's interpretation of the situation, of the previous school's interpretation of the situation, we had to explain what our concerns for the student were and how we could address the situation properly. And our major concern was safety. What we learned before we had any contact with the student is that we had to make an effort with our planning to make the setting safe and right for learning. Also, we use this time to have the parent update us on medical history of the student. We learn at this time the severity of her condition and the things that we can do and the things that we can't do for the student. Student communication is very important. The more you are able to develop a relationship with the student, the more helpful this communication can be during the process of learning. It puts an ease into the concerns that you already have with dealing with a student with the other students. The student may know information about their body that we might not be able to detect, which can allow for better transitioning and modifications with activities. For example, we were practicing push-ups for the upcoming fitness testing with one of the warm-ups during class. I had automatically assumed that the student would have difficulties performing the task and was ready to modify the activity by just doing the plank position. I didn't initially think to ask the student were they capable of doing push-ups. When I proceeded with demonstrating the plank, the student showed me that they do push-ups at home, and that their conditioning mainly affected their lower body, not their upper body. It definitely was a learning experience for me, which told me in general to ask questions from the student if you can. They have a voice which can be used as a valuable resource. Communication with your support staff if you have support staff. It is very important to get everybody involved that is capable of being involved when working with this student or your other students. If there's a dedicated aide, use them as a resource to help you understand how to work with the student. It's always good to have an extra set of eyes when dealing in a difficult situation. Planning. Plan effectively by having options. Increase your options by having stations/centers that focus on all aspects of the activity like fundamentals, technique, and gameplay. This planning should also include your modifications. Student ratios in each group, duration of activities, structure of warm-up, teacher-guided activities, and independent activities.
Classroom management. Having good classroom management skills is imperative to be able to successfully implement accommodations in a PE class. It is important to make your expectations clear on day one and be honest and explain why things are sometimes done differently. Establish routines that will promote efficiency and student-centered teaching and learning. Delivery and execution. Classroom management ties right into your ability as a teacher to effectively deliver and execute your lesson plans. Being prepared and organized for your daily lessons will definitely help make your classes run smooth. Incorporating accommodations in your general ed lessons can be intimidating because you don't know how the students will respond, but trust your instincts. Trust the adaptive PE teacher that you are co-planning and teaching with, and just be confident.
Documentation. It is simple, but it is needed just in case an issue arises. For example, with our student, the parent had a concern that she thought that her child had strained her arm during one of our activities. We couldn't recall anything happening in class, so we asked for a particular date when we were working on the activity. What we learned was the student did strain their arm during an activity, but it was not in our class. On that particular day, we were working on something completely different, and then the student realized that they strained their arm in a different class. Our documentation of the things that we did helped the parent understand that the child had hurt themselves elsewhere and that we were organized and getting to the root of the concern. With our lesson design, This works alongside with your planning. Know the space that you have to work with. Understand what is acceptable when it comes to the activity you're working on and what is needed to accomplish your goals. Understand the spatial awareness you have when grouping your activities. Have alternative activities in place if you have to change plans due to weather or other circumstances. With our student, the spatial awareness was probably the most important key because we had to make sure with it being at the middle school level that, some kids are very aggressive and some kids are very passive. Our student was kind of in between, but more on the passive side. So we had to make sure that at times when we did our activities, that the activity allowed her to be able to learn and grow and not fear of getting hurt from our aggressive students.
Organization. At this point, you have coordinated, you have planned. It is finally time to actually execute these lessons. Be organized. Make sure that you have all of the appropriate equipment that you will need for each lesson. A lot of our accommodations involved me having to use alternative pieces of equipment because our student could not use standard hard balls. I had to make sure I requested and received these items in advance to make sure I would be prepared. Also, we had to be organized, just like Will said, in how and where we placed our activities in the room and outside. We had to always make sure that the group that had the student with the 504 was placed in an area that was secure from flying objects. And reflection. Realistically, you may not do this after each lesson or every day, but it is important to do so at least at the end of the week and definitely at the end of every unit. What worked well? What didn't work so well? Why didn't it work? What could we have done to get this student more involved? What changes can be made to this activity so that all of the students are more involved? How did the level of participation in activities compare from last year to this year? What changes were made to influence this? So now we're going to go into an example of a few sports that we went over in class and basically just go through some standard lessons that almost all PE teachers go through and some of the common accommodations that we made for this student.
And basically, one of the lesson areas that we worked on during this semester was football related, and we went over the mechanics of throwing to moving targets, route running, and mini games. And while we were doing these things, we had accommodations where we had to keep in mind that the student is restricted from really catching any footballs, so we will allow her to throw the football, but catching was not in the option at this particular point in time, and we always use softer equipment for her to throw. Objects that was thrown directly in front of her was an issue, so what we tried to do is when we did our station work, we made sure that when it came to the throwing and catching, that the catching was eliminated and then more so focused on the mechanics of throwing. With one of the stations we worked on was the hula hoops, and what we did is we had a distance away from the hula hoop, which she was a thrower, and she had options to throw to either a short distance, a medium distance, or a long distance. And we gave that option to all the students in class, and what we found out was not only our student with a disability enjoyed the activity, but some of our other students enjoyed the activity as well because they could use a little help with their fundamentals and technique. With our route running activity, we allowed our student to play running back as opposed to our student catching the ball. And basically what we would do is have a formation set up. She would be in the background. The quarterback will hand her the ball, and she will run to a desired area. This was allowing the student to get the opportunity to be a part of a football play, but and understand what it takes to play in a football game without the contact. For our agility and endurance activities, the student was able to participate with minimal modifications. What we had to account for was the shifting of her body. So instead of the student going in and out of the cones, we allowed the students to go more so around in a long line. It was actually the same activity as the other students, but it limited the moving of her hips because with our student, her issue was in her lower body. So we wanted to be very aware of her lower body. The student was able to engage in all of the activities basically by using softer equipment, options on which equipment to use, options on which position to play, and the choice of running shorter distances or longer distances. Stationary targets and moving targets was an option for the student. In general, when we started, the student preferred to throw to stationary targets, but as the student became a little bit more comfortable, the student expanded it more to the moving targets. And that was your moving targets as if the student was the quarterback in football and you had people playing wide receiver. Right here are some pictures of some of the activities in class. The first picture to the corner on the left is the activity where the student has options of throwing to 3 different targets, and you can do it from many differences. And as well, you can see pictures of the student running in the shuttle run with the activity of football, as well as some of the other students playing in the activities. Okay, here's a few activities when it deals with eye-hand coordination and when it comes with tennis. This was an activity where, in general, the student had the option of really growing on their own because we allowed all of the students to have a racket, all of the students to use balloons or wiffle balls, and really focus on the individual skill. Due to this student's restrictions, we could not really use a regular tennis ball, so what we started off with the class with was everybody getting the opportunity to use a balloon, everybody getting the opportunity to use the wiffle ball, and then gradually, we moved up to the tennis ball. The student was aware that the tennis ball was probably too hard for her, but her participating with all of the other modifications allowed her to still do everything else that the class was doing. When we were in relay lines, instead of moving back and forth across the floor, we allowed the student to stand in place and perform the skill repeatedly in place. This gave the student an opportunity to really focus on her arm position when it comes to tennis, how hard to hit the ball when it comes to tennis, and how to use the racket. We also gave the student an option to use a badminton racket instead of a tennis racket because the handle was easier to grip. And in general, the student chose the badminton racket, but at the same token wanted to try the tennis racket because everybody else was using it. And that was the one thing that was positive about our student was she was willing to try, but if she knew that it was a little bit too much over her head, she understood that as well. When doing activities where the class is paired up with a partner, we always positioned her inside the room where we can make sure that she was safe from any flying objects that could potentially hurt her if she was hit. So the spatial awareness is very important. Here are some more pictures. The first picture, we have the student rolling with the tennis racket and the wiffle ball. And with this activity, the student has to keep the wiffle ball in control. Also, you can see pictures where the student is actually using the tennis racket to keep the wiffle ball up in the air. We call it hit it up. And what we would do was give a desired time and see how many times you can keep the tennis ball in control and in the air.
Another one of the sports that we covered in our class was volleyball. A few typical volleyball lessons a teacher may do: serving, making different types of hits, playing keep it up. And here are a few of the accommodations that were made for volleyball. Again, we could not use a standard volleyball due to the 504 restriction, so we used beach ball, balloons, and volleyball trainers, but most of the time we used the beach ball for this class. Sorry. We also use relay lines a lot for the kids to participate in to help practice skill development as far as the serving and the different types of hits. So what would happen, the kids would line up in a relay line. One person would be in a hula hoop, and they would toss the ball so that the person in the front of the line could hit the ball. And then that person would run and go get it and bring it back to the next person. So she had the chance to serve the ball in the relay lines, but we would never put her in a position to go and get the ball and come back. We would just make the next person in line because we didn't want because the whole class is doing this activity, and we never wanted to put her in a position to get hit by a ball. But she always had the opportunity to practice the skills that we were doing in the relay line. And it's also helped because all of the balls are flying in the same direction. So that definitely helped as far as keeping her and all of the students safe because everybody's staying in line. While participating in the activities, I already said it, the student was never put in a position to retrieve any of the balls.
Yeah. Can you give me
So when we played the game Keep It Up, that's basically a game just like for tennis where the students were practicing keeping the ball in the air. Whatever you do, don't let the ball hit the ground.
And so, yeah, that was good. Thank you.
So instead of playing as whole class or half class groups, we broke the class up into smaller groups, which would definitely reduce the chances of physical contact because, again, with her condition, any type of contact could be seriously damaging to her. So breaking that game down into smaller groups was definitely a plus. And, again, it made her feel like she was fully active in the class. While participating in the small groups, we also made sure to have her group in a small area because accidents do happen. The kids are still trying to realize what their strength is and how exactly to hit the ball. So we still needed to position her in the area that was safe from flying balls so that she wouldn't get hit. And here are some pictures from our volleyball unit. And she's in line with everybody else. We're not isolating her. She's in the mix of everything, and everything that all of the other students are doing, she is doing as well.
Okay, at the end of the day, your structure and routine are very important for having success with students, including with physical disabilities. Communication with the student, parent, and staff will allow you to have success in managing your physical education class that has students with physical disabilities.
Our goal as physical educators should be to have all students engaged in activities. Inclusion should not water down activities, but instead create more options for